The absolute safety of the labyrinth is shattered by a single crimson spear. Now, Veldora must face the sister he fears most in an epoch-making clash of true dragons. Meanwhile, the Primal Demons take on Velgryn's parallel existence, and King Gazel faces a deadly assassin who fights with his own master's sword style. AI Anime and Manga presents... Before we dive into the battle, please take a second to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe. YouTube members get early access to upcoming episodes and help cover the AI narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and rendering that make this series possible. Now, the Empire's invasion begins in earnest. For Veldora, the day could not have gone much worse. It was an empty field of grass. The city, well prepared for the Imperial invasion, remained isolated in the labyrinth, and that was why the beauty flying in from the sky above stood out so much against this backdrop. Veldora muttered despite himself.
Ah, my sister.
There was no strength in his voice. For those who knew how Veldora normally carried on, the sight was unthinkable. Sheris stammered. Is it possible that this is Lady Velgrynd, the sister I have heard rumor of?
Indeed, you are correct. She is Velgrynd the Flame Dragon, one of the all-powerful true dragons, and my sister, yes.
Everyone in the control center, upon hearing this, leaped into action at once. An emergency alarm rang across the labyrinth, advising all within earshot to exercise maximum vigilance against the enemy on the outside. Whoa, Master! Rimuru's not even here! What are we gonna do? Ramirez was in a panic already. She wasn't exactly someone to rely on in normal times. Right now, she could do little more than shout and carry on. In a scientific laboratory, she was a valued resource. But in battle, there was basically no role for her. But Ramirez was smart enough to have some powerful friends. Trainee's sisters administered the labyrinth, and the dryads working under them were all beavering away to make sure things kept functioning properly. Ramirez had declined a position in the 10 Dungeon Marvels, but she was still the overall supervisor of the labyrinth. However, a good half of the Marvels, the figures who'd be relied on the most right now, were in the midst of an evolutionary sleep. Beretta, their former leader, had the important job of guarding Ramirez. Beretta kept his eyes on the situation and said, "It wouldn't appear that she's going to be too friendly with us. Let's intercept her in the labyrinth." Beretta kept watching the display while Trainee and the others checked on the situation labyrinth-wide. Out of the 10 Dungeon Marvels, only the 4 Dragon Lords were currently awake and available. Ghidorah was conscious as well, but he had already been sent out with the Demon Colossus to help out the armed nation of Dwargen. They were thus less than ideally prepared for Velgrynd, but if they made full use of the perfect, flawless fortress that was the labyrinth, even this reduced force should be enough to buy some time with. Beretta thought so at least, so he made the proposal, and Veldora nodded his agreement.
I don't know what she's here for, but if she came alone, she truly deserves nothing but my laughter.
With all of us together, we have nothing to fear.
He grinned assuredly, but his expression was noticeably strained. He was scared. Just a couple of days ago, Veldora had been in hard combat with Velzard, his elder sister, and with that incident fresh on his mind, now here was Velgrynd, his second eldest sister. Not only that, she was staging an invasion of Rimuru, capital of the Jura Tempest Federation, all by herself. This was simply outrageous in Veldora's mind, and now his head was racing, trying desperately to find a way out of this situation. That's why he was so eager to jump at Beretta's proposal. But just then, Velgrynd addressed him from the display. "Veldora, be a good boy and come out for me, all right?" Velgrynd's eyes, oddly enough, were fixated on the screen, boring right into Veldora, and her voice echoed directly into his mind. Charis asked, "Sir Veldora..."
Do not flinch at this, Charis. This is a trap. If I go out there without a thought in the world, it's bound to be awful for me.
Charis could only answer, yes. Veldora had no qualms about sounding this pathetic. Charis couldn't help but find it bewildering.
Huh? Well, if her target is my master, then it's got nothing to do with us.
Ramirez, trying to save her own hide and doing a commendable job at it, was immediately silenced by Veldora's hand. Now, whether she wanted to be or not, she was part of this. So So the labyrinth staff decided to hold their ground, but Velgrynd was not finished. Oh, you're not coming out? You always were a little slow on the uptake, weren't you? But all right. In that case, I'll give you just one gentle warning. The image alone didn't reveal what Velgrynd was saying, but everyone present understood that things were rapidly changing with her. And Veldora, who still had her voice being channeled into his brain, knew full well she was about to do something. Veldora tried to reassure himself. It was fine. Ramirez's labyrinth was made of incredible stuff that could shut off dimensions. Even he would have difficulty breaking through it, and as long as they remained inside, even his sister wouldn't be able to touch them. He was right. As long as they stayed in the labyrinth, they'd continue to remain safe from Velgrynd. Maybe she could smash her way down 1 or 2 floors, but Ramirez could restore it quicker than she could destroy it. With Veldora powering everything, keeping Velgrynd safely away should be doable.
Do not panic. With you and I working together, no adversary can...
Veldora attempted to calm Ramirez, but he couldn't finish his sentence. On the screen, he had caught sight of Velgrynd producing a pure crimson spear.
Maester! That's real bad news up there! I'm not even sure Mazecraft can block that!
Veldora thought, you don't need to remind me.
I know that! All hands, brace for impact.
Nobody doubted Veldora's words, each of them assuming a defensive posture. Just a few moments later, a severe shockwave rocked the labyrinth.
Oh, no way.
Alpha, Beta, and the rest of the staff were producing a flurry of damage reports. Damage confirmed down to floor 50. The upper levels are all but destroyed. At that moment, the myth of the labyrinth's purported safety was practically destroyed. Then, just as Veldora was panicking over what to do next, he received a thought communication from Rimuru. Rimuru's voice came through, painfully cheerful. Hey, how's it going? He deeply resented the cheerful voice. Veldora fired back over the link.
You fool! Now is not the time for casual greetings. Things are, rather hectic in here. My sister is pursuing me. She is outside the labyrinth right now, but at this rate, she is going to storm inside.
Veldora waited for an answer. Rimuru? Yes, surely Rimuru could do something about this. Instead, however, came the concerned reply. You gonna be okay? Instantly, it made Veldora realize the truth. Rimuru was just as strained right now. If he wasn't, he'd be right back here immediately. And since there was no sign of that, it'd be unwise to wait further for him. And maybe that was why Veldora could feel the false hope from before draining away. If he couldn't rely on Rimuru, he had no choice but to go out himself.
I will have to come out for her. That would beat her laying waste to the labyrinth to reach me.
Veldora thought he might be able to make it, although this was backed by zero evidence. It was easy to forget at times, but Rimuru had been quite a suitable trainer. If he had been able to withstand that, Veldora thought, surely Velgrynd wouldn't defeat him that easily. Rimuru answered over the link. All right, I'll take full responsibility for the fallout, so just do something about Velgrynd for me. Can you manage that? Rimuru sounded like he didn't expect Veldora to lose either. And if he was taking full responsibility for the fallout, that meant he couldn't complain no matter how much destruction was wrought from this. Taking that into consideration, Rimuru was all but asking him to show off the fruits of his training up to now. Besides, this was Rimuru asking. What he wanted, he got.
Oh? Well, in that case, allow me to handle everything for you.
He turned his attention back toward Velgrynd. The chat with Rimuru did wonders for his stress level. Suddenly, he felt supremely calm and serene. Veldora said, sounding fully relaxed,
I will need to go out myself.
Ramirez stared at him.
Master?
Beretta stared too. Sir Veldora? Ramirez and Beretta stared at him in shock. Veldora gave them a refreshed sneer like all his problems were behind him.
I too have little interest in fighting my sister, but if using the labyrinth to stall for time won't work, we have no other option.
Cheris tried to object. But
It's all right, Cheris. Immortality within the labyrinth only works because it exists in an isolated space. Now that we know it won't work against my sister, the best way to minimize further damage is for me to lead.
As long as Rimuru was alive and well, Veldora was de facto immortal. If he wanted to prevent any more sacrifice, Veldora's only choice was to leave. Cheris said, "Then let me join you."
No, stay here. You've become stronger, but it is still nothing comparable to me. Perhaps Zegian is another matter, but anyone else would just be a hindrance.
It was harsh but true. And Veldora was already prepared for what was to come. There was a gallant air to him now, nothing at all like the pathetic fear of a moment ago.
Will you be okay, Master?
No, I won't be okay at all. I don't even want to think of the horrid abuse my sisters put me through, but enough of that. I too have become stronger. Encountering Rimuru has helped me grow. I too am a trainer now, and I've learned just how immature I have been. I am nothing like how I used to be.
Veldora forced out a laugh. He had mentally uplifted himself so much that he was back to his normal tone.
So do not worry. Just sit back and watch as I heroically stride into the sea.
With that, he left the labyrinth by himself. Now Veldora recalled his battle with Velzard. He hadn't seen the older of his two sisters in quite a while, and she seemed far more powerful, her defense much more impermeable than in the past. It wasn't something the old Veldora would ever have picked up on. Running into Rimuru had helped him grow beyond recognition, and nothing symbolized that more than his acquiring an ultimate skill. Being sealed away inside Rimuru's stomach gave Veldora the chance to observe Rimuru and learn a great many things. It was there where he realized that power is only meaningful when used in the right ways. He had an enormous store of magicule energy, the largest among all the true dragons. It outclassed those of his two sisters, and it allowed him to be one of the world's strongest presences without working very hard at it. But that was naive, and Veldora knew it. He knew that some would struggle to win until the very end, no matter how weak they were. Rimuru was one of them, and he knew that many who opposed him were the same way. Hinata, Granville, and the Demon Lord Luminous. They relied on more than just their power, using every possible trick in the book to earn their victory, and he knew never to let his guard down against them. Now that he understood that, Veldora was a different creature from before, and he could prove it. Even during combat with Velzard, he could hold his own and go on the counterattack instead of just getting beaten up as usual. To him, Velzard was a kind of natural enemy, an extremely unfavorable opponent given how incompatible his strength was with hers. She had been born first, the upper limits of her powers all but a mystery to him. He may have had a larger magicule store, but they were so close to each other in nearly every other way that it wasn't that much of an advantage. In a proper battle, he couldn't hold out much hope for victory. He had challenged her several times since being born, but was beaten back terribly each time. Velzard's Eternal World skill was both an ironclad defense for her and a weapon that hampered Veldora's movement. Gales, destruction, corrosion, ruin. All potential effects were nullified before this absolute wall. This was the kind of terrifying sister he was up against, but much to his surprise, Veldora found that he could actually hold his own. Wow, he thought, I'm doing great. Velzard, after all, had learned how to fully control the magical force she released, something Veldora only noticed because he could control his own as well. The difference, however, was just way too big to compare. That was thanks in no small part to the nature of Velzard's powers, letting her stop kinetic energy with so much ease. But the yawning gap between them was still obvious even without that. But despite having that kind of skill, Velzard was unexpectedly honest in her praise of Veldora's growth. Yes, it's quite a surprise. You used to only act out like a spoiled child, but now you're using your brain to fight as well, aren't you? At this rate, maybe we don't need to destroy you after all. There was a disturbing word or two in there, but the rest of it was unmistakably praise for Veldora. Considering he felt nothing but fear for her before then, it made him very happy to see. He still couldn't beat her, but regardless. So what about Velgrynd? Well, Velzard and Velgrynd were about an even match in ability. To Veldora, they were both big sisters he had problems dealing with, and if he was honest with himself, he didn't really want to fight either of them. But that wasn't an option right now, so he had no choice but to step up. Veldora assessed it aloud.
Velgrynd is as formidable as ever. Not even I could unleash an attack reaching across multiple labyrinth floors like that.
Perhaps he could just use brute force to twist the dimensional layers enough to destroy 1 or 2 floors. But even if he used up all his magicules, not even he could smash through multiple floors with a single blow.
The ultimate skill must be the key. If I want to hold my own against her, I will need to exercise Faust, Lord of Investigation, to the fullest.
He was right. Veldora outclassed Velgrynd in magicule count, and he hoped that put him in a slightly better position with her than Velzard. That hope helped overcome the trauma of having this encounter in the first place. The key to victory here lay in how well he used his powers. They had never seriously fought each other, but there was no doubt that Velgrynd was the stronger of the two. But that was a tale from the past. Velzard was hard to beat because her skills worked particularly well against Veldora. But that wouldn't be the case with Velgrynd. What's more, thanks to Rimuru, he had acquired the ultimate skill Faust, Lord of Investigation. That power worked against Velzard as well, and having it in hand made him think that even Velgrynd would be nothing to fear. Now Veldora felt ready to take this mission on. His confidence surged. Nobody had doomed him to defeat yet, had they? He needed to test the extent of this power anyway, so why not do it against his own sister? With a new determination, Veldora appeared in front of Velgrynd. The siblings stared each other down in mid-air, both in human form. They were perfectly still in the sky, which was natural for them as true dragons. Velgrynd looked quite happy to see Veldora as she said, "I'm glad you were intelligent enough to understand the meaning behind my warning. So you've decided to cooperate with me now?" She wouldn't be happy for long.
I refuse, my sister. I am not a tool for you to use as you see fit, and I'd much appreciate it if you'd stop involving me in your sisterly quarrel.
Velgrynd answered, "Involve? Such a mean word to use. What I'm saying is that if you willingly cooperate with me, I would welcome you as a close friend. Then I could teach you how to use your powers, allowing you to run wild as much as you want. Although I'd ask you to let me choose the times and places for you."
My answer remains no, my sister. I have already fully perfected the use of my powers, and further, I no longer enjoy violence for violence's sake. I have grown, you see. I am a grown dragon.
Velgrynd's reply came cold. "I wouldn't be so brazen if I were you. Perhaps we've spoiled you a bit too much, but very well. Let me see then just how much you've grown." With that light back and forth over and done with, Velgrynd was ready to duke it out. Veldora wasted no time shoring up his position. From the start, his sister didn't expect to recruit him strictly through verbal negotiation. She'd display her strength and it would make him obey. And if that didn't work, she'd just rough him up enough that Ludora could take control of him. Her taking the persuasion route was just Velgrynd's way of showing a little kindness. So, feeling mildly annoyed at this breakdown of negotiations, Velgrynd made her first unhesitant thrust at Veldora. She wanted to make this quick, incapacitating him enough that she'd have time to wait before Ludora showed up. But her right-handed chop was lightly parried away, rewarded with a kick from Veldora. Velgrynd, rapidly growing frustrated, caught it with her left hand and then the truth hit her. This force didn't feel weakened at all. Velgrynd thought that Veldora had yet to fully recover from 300 years of being sealed away. The Veldora she knew would always throw 100% of his power around, so she assumed his current weaker front was just an after effect of the seal. That back and forth just now made her realize the error of her ways. Velgrynd admitted, "You've improved a little, haven't you? Now I see that all your bragging is more than just words."
My Veldora-style death stance is as invincible as it is undefeatable, and even you, my sister, will realize just how powerless you are before my... Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Velgrynd hadn't come here to listen to Veldora smugly explain why he was so strong. Instead, even more annoyed than before, she launched into a more vicious attack. Crimson flames gathered around both of her fists, as well as the supple legs stretching out from her dress. Then a flurry of attacks came as a wild dance, searing enough to burn to death anything that touched it. But Veldora could withstand it.
Ow! Hot, hot, hot.
He sounded like a child and was fleeing at full speed from her, but it did not exact serious damage upon him. Velgrynd rebuked him. I've given you a great deal of discipline over the years, but it appears your head is just as immature as it always was. All that talk about being invincible and undefeatable is nothing short of ridiculous. Velgrynd was as furious as a raging inferno, but still she remained calm. Now she saw that Veldora was not only recovered from his prison, but far stronger than she ever expected. Velgrynd calculated the problem. She couldn't exercise her full force in this form, and she couldn't deal much damage either. Ludora would never be able to dominate Veldora when he showed up. The reason she came here wasn't to rough Veldora up a bit and teach him a lesson. It was to dominate him. Once Ludora emerged victorious against Guy, they planned to give him his freedom back. But right now, he could be a very important pawn for them, and they wanted to procure him. From Velgrynd's point of view, there was no point in keeping this a penny-ant game, and Veldora seemed to agree.
Quoi? Me clothes! The precious outfit granted to me by Rimuru. Now they're all burned because of you, my sister.
The outfit he had on was a gift from Rimuru, a token of his gratitude. It actually was precious to him, and now Velgrynd's attack had ruined it. Given enough time, it would have been influenced enough by Veldora's aura to become a literal part of his body, but expecting that much of a transformation in just a few days would be asking too much. Veldora himself was largely unhurt, but this was a severe blow to his heart. It was wholly his fault for showing up to this wearing flammable gear, but still, he felt justified in taking his frustration out on his sister. And that was fortunate for Veldora, actually. Anger, after all, has a way of replacing fear in your mind, and no matter how motivated he was for this, he still had a fear of his sisters ingrained in him over many, many years. The two of them were a symbol of fear in his mind, and the idea of confronting either one with his full might would normally seem outlandish. Now, however, the fetters had been lifted.
Sister or not, I will offer you no more mercy. Prepare to face my wrath.
With that shout, Veldora released his powers. In his place, a mighty, majestic dragon, jet black in color, revealed himself. Velgrynd snickered at the sight. It was too convenient for her. Velgrynd sneered, "Huh? All that nonsense? You truly are too unintelligent for your own good. It seems you've forgotten some very important facts. You cannot defeat me, and I suppose it's time to teach you that once more." Velgrynd transformed as well into her beautiful limber crimson dragon form, and so the epoch-making kaiju battle began. Just as Rimuru was about to head into the imperial capital, the dwarven king Gazel Dwargo was facing a desperate battlefield. There, far in the distance, was a living incarnation of beauty spreading death everywhere she went.
Gravity collapse? They say you could theoretically make it as powerful as you want, but can Legion magic defend against it?
Vaughn answered him. Don't be silly. You could have both the magic support and magic strike divisions running defense for us, and there's no way they could block that. That's how true dragons work. It's beyond a menace. Gazel was answered by Vaughn, his supreme military commander on the field. He had deployed the dwarven army here as he awaited Gazel's arrival, and that meant he had a front-row seat for the destruction of the Empire's composite division positioned a stone's throw away. The soldiers were speechless at the sight of all the carnage. Their will to fight doubtlessly broken, but not even they ran from the scene, much to their credit. Everyone on hand understood that by this point there was nowhere safe to run away to. If their deaths would allow their families to survive even a little while longer, that alone made it worth remaining here. And so, with that in mind, they maintained their battle lines. King Gazel was far too heroic a figure to let any of his troops' lives go to waste. Every soldier of his trusted in that, and that was why they swore their allegiance to him. And while he understood well the emotions that drove them, Gazel was distressed, never showing it on his face but finding his heart in a state of deep turmoil. Gazel knew they could not win. In fact, this may very well end with the lives of everyone here wasted. Should they surrender? No, the Empire would never accept it. They had to show them their power at least, or as much as they had left of it. He'd have to make the enemy believe they were more valuable as an ally rather than an enemy. Otherwise, the Empire would never let them continue to exist in their worldview. Thus, the only way to survive was to fight to the bitter end. No matter how many casualties it produced, Gazel and his troops had to continue believing that the sacrifice wouldn't be in vain.
They say quality is better than quantity in war, but this is simply beyond any reasonable expectation. Our only option is to challenge and defeat her by ourselves.
Vaughn pushed back. Whoa, don't you have a responsibility for them as king?
Look, our enemy number's exactly one person in size, does it not? Is now the time to ask about who's responsible for what?
Gazel gave Vaughn's question an embittered smile. The sole enemy here was Velgrynd. Strategy and tactics were meaningless. Gazel's side needed a way to survive, and that was it. Vaughn, likely well aware of this, tried to keep the mood light, hoping to lighten Gazel's heartache a bit. Realizing that helped Gazel dispel his hesitation on the matter. Henrietta reported to them, "My liege, the enemy is more than just the flame dragon. There are multiple presences detected behind her, and it seems they are performing some manner of ritual." Lady Jane reported that the extreme magic spell from before is likely part of this. Gazel nodded. That extreme magic, which annihilated an army of some 60,000, was being used for a ritual. That alone told him that an evil plot was afoot, one he dared not even try to imagine. But Velgrynd, at the center of it all, was going to be very difficult to beat, and so the only way to foil this plot would be to beat whatever was behind her. Dolph asked, "Should we move our forces?" Gazel shook his head. The Heavy Strike Division lacked much mobility by design. Improperly shuttling them around would leave them exposed to magic attack. Normally, they could use their stout defenses to push through anything, but none of that mattered much against Velgrynd. The only option left was a de facto suicide strike from the 500-strong Pegasus Knights at their disposal. Vaughn smiled as he spoke. "I wouldn't like having this place even less well-defended than before. I think Gazel's right. The only way is to go in alone by ourselves." "Right, Dolph?" Dolph scratched his head in response. "How disrespectful, Vaughn. Calling the king by merely his given name is outrageous. You should think more about your position." The lecture went on for a little while longer. He finally ended it with a broad smile. "But this time at least you have a point. If we want to buy as much time as possible, we must avoid spreading our forces too thin. If it's us alone, we can be highly mobile and speedy enough to perhaps surprise the enemy." Henrietta had no objections either. Lady Jane said she would join the struggle once she persuaded the elders along those lines. "I'll let them worry about the future. For now, let's have a fun little rampage just like the old days." The enthusiasm was palpable in her reply. These were all old friends, and the years hadn't changed them one bit. They were united in their hearts with Gazel, standing by him to help him through even this most difficult of times. Gazel laughed.
You fools. I wonder what my chaperone Jane would say if she heard this
Jane had accompanied Gazel and his band for many years, offering them her advice and suggestions. She may have been the Dwarven Kingdom's most powerful mage, but to Gazel, she was also his most trusted of advisors. Gazel was sure she wouldn't like this as he struggled to make a decision, but it seemed he was a tad too slow. Just before Gazel gave the order to march, Jane teleported onto the scene and said, "Lordy Lord, I take my eyes off you for a moment, King Gazel, and I see this? What a pain this is."
Jane, were you listening in on us?
She sneered at the uncomfortable-looking Gazel and shook her head. "Here I was breathing a sigh of relief now that you've become such a great king, or so I thought. But this time, I cannot blame you. There is simply no other way to deal with an opponent like this. The true dragons are known as catastrophe-level threats precisely because they lie beyond the control of any one government.
True enough.
Any magic spell a human being could conjure would never affect a true dragon. And now, Velgrynd was harnessing magic on a massive scale, well beyond any human level of control. Even if every human champion in the world came together, their chances against a true dragon would be a complete unknown. But all was not necessarily lost. That was what Jane was here to report. Jane said, "I received a call a few moments ago." Jane continued, "His Majesty Rimuru is going to send reinforcements. Why don't we wait for them and see what we can do?"
I don't believe it's been that long since I contacted him.
Jane replied, "It is hard for me to comprehend as well, yes. But I am sure he's not lying. Vester himself told me so, and His Majesty can make all of his subjects take action with just a few words." Everyone nodded at the words of the jaded Jane. They knew she was correct, and besides, those ever-reliable reinforcements arrived before they had the time to change their minds. Suddenly, a large distortion appeared in space. Then, as if encased in an enormous cocoon, a small group of elite forces revealed itself. There were 100 members of Gabiru's team Hiryu, along with 300 more from Gabwa's team Kurinai. Every member of this team of 400 was over A in rank, making it a squad as potentially powerful as the Pegasus Knights. What attracted even more attention, however, was their enormous weaponry.
I heard it was complete, but they're certainly not holding back deploying it, are they? That's Rimuru for you.
Vaughn asked, "Is that the completed magic armor soldier?" Henrietta answered, "Indeed. It is called the Demon Colossus, I was told, and it's a good thing it's on our side." Gazel, of course, didn't expect it to emerge victorious against Velgrynd, but the sheer majesty of its presence would be enough to bring reassurance to his soldiers.
A stout ally to have. If we had a larger supply of them, maybe we could have fought a little bit better?
Jane answered, "Sadly, not even that would likely mean much against Velgrynd. If it were a disaster-level threat, then perhaps, but..." Gazel and his advisors continued to chit-chat for a bit longer as the group approached them. This was Gabiru, leader of the newly deployed corps, along with the 3 demonesses led by Tensura. Gabwa and Hakuro followed behind them. Tensura, not Gabiru, spoke up first. "It has been far too long, Your Majesty." This was most assuredly the right call. Tensura had diplomatic privileges and a wealth of experience. She was used to this kind of situation.
Indeed it has, Lady Testarossa. My thanks for the reinforcements.
Usually, the very idea of Gabiru directly addressing a visitor would violate royal norms. There were certain customs and formalities to take into consideration, and along those lines, the king would normally have an intermediary speak on his behalf. But now was no time for such talk, something mutually understood among all parties. So they did away with all decorum and made this a regular, uninhibited strategy meeting. Once everyone had moved over to the command center, they dove straight into the topic at hand. Testarossa began by recapping what Rimuru and his allies were up to, then offered a proposal for the strategy they needed to implement here.
Rimuru seeks to strike the Emperor himself?
Vaughn said, "It certainly sounds more realistic than any suicide mission." Dolph answered, "Do you think?" "Because it sounds rather reckless to me," Gazel growled at the idea as he thought it over, even as Vaughn sounded optimistic. Dolph, meanwhile, was still looking for another way, but there was no time left to ponder. With nobody else offering alternatives, Tensura pushed ahead. Tensura said, "We will deal with Lady Velgrynd. What I want everyone else to do is put an end to the ritual taking place behind her."
No objections here.
Gazel promptly agreed with the offer, as welcome as it was unexpected. The demons were the only ones who could be entrusted with this most dangerous of roles. They had no one else to volunteer for it, but Jane wasn't so sure. Jane asked, "One moment. I ask you, Lady Testarossa, would primals such as yourselves be able to defeat the flame dragon?" This was a vital question, one that would affect the entire rest of the operation. Jane, for one, was clearly doubtful Testarossa's group could win. That was how overwhelming Velgrynd seemed to her. The 3 primal demons here were undoubtedly the greatest strength among the allied forces right now, but that made this question all the more important. If Testarossa and the demons fell, that would be the end for everyone else on hand as well. Testarossa answered honestly, "To be honest, I don't think we can, no." Jane pressed the point. "Well, in that case, we must dedicate ourselves to defense, not attack. Instead of needlessly provoking them, would it not be better to wait here for His Majesty Rimura's strategy to succeed? If there's no chance of victory, stall for time." That was Jane's argument, and while it seemed sound enough, it was hard for the Rimuru camp to accept. Carrera sounded adamant. "Unfortunately, that's not an option. If we leave Lady Velgrynd on her own, she might return to the Imperial capital to interfere with our leader." Rimuru told her she was fine not to worry about him, but nonetheless, she felt it necessary to keep the flame dragon's attention focused squarely on them.
And more to the point, we did not come here to discuss plans with everyone. Sir Rimuru has given us his edict, and we have come to relay it to you. We will consult with you over ways we can help, but I want it clear that we will not tolerate anyone in our way.
Even Hakuro, rarely one to speak out of turn, was harsh. Time was too short for courtesy. They had to unify under a single flag at once. Gazel correctly realized this, raising a hand to quiet his fretful colleagues.
If my master Sir Hakuro says so, I have no choice but to relent. Or do any of you have other ideas?
His advisors all gravely shook their heads. Dolph said if the Imperial Information Bureau is involved, ending the ritual won't come that easily. It would be best for all of us to unite under one common purpose. Dolph's statement was the final decider. All that remained was to work out the details, and with that, the plan was quickly finalized. Provoking Velgrynd was no different from sticking your hand in a hornet's nest. Testarossa and her team, although fully aware of this, still dauntlessly pressed on. Ultima asked, "You think us stepping in would delay the ritual?" Testarossa replied, "I suppose we'll have to see." Carrera said, "Not even I could maintain a gravity collapse of that level. Doing that while taking on us three? No way that's possible, right?" Testarossa answered, "I think it is entirely possible. That's why I am wary of her." Carrera asked, "Are you kidding?" Testarossa replied, "Oh, I'm quite serious." Ultima shrugged it off. Whatever, we'll find out soon enough in battle." There was no hesitation among Testarossa and the other demons as they spoke. They made a beeline straight for Velgrynd, not even trying to hide their motives, and Velgrynd quickly noticed the three of them. She too expressed no alarm. In fact, she seemed delighted to see the demonesses coming her way. Testarossa greeted her. "Hello there. Lovely day for a fight, isn't it?" Velgrynd smiled back. "It certainly is. But first, let me go ahead and ask, why don't you join our camp? As primals, you certainly possess the strength for it. I promise you'll all be treated well." Velgrynd maintained her casual composure in the face of the three demonesses as she made the offer. Needless to say, the answer was no. Testarossa declined first. "I will have to decline your offer. I have my own history with the Empire, you see," Ultima agreed. "Same here. I finally have a master to serve now, and it's loads more comfortable than I'd imagined. No way I'm gonna give it up," Carrera added. "Exactly. But more importantly, let's put an end to this talk and start fighting. If 3 against 1 isn't your speed, you could always call in those folks behind you." The refusal was unanimous. No time spent deliberating. Carrera was clearly eager for a fight, not demonstrating the slightest interest in negotiations. Seeing Velgrynd's magic up close had ignited her own fighting instincts. Velgrynd laughed. "So that's your answer? Well, good. In that case, I'll gladly play with you for a little while." That was the signal for battle to begin. With a slow, swaying motion, Velgrynd split in front of the demoness's eyes. Or, to be more precise, there were now 2 Velgrynds, exact mirror images of each other. This was a familiar sight to Testarossa. Testarossa observed, "A troubling sign. This is more than just a replication. Perhaps it's a bit closer to Rain's ubiquital mist." Testarossa recalled her own fight with Rain. Exactly why they fell into combat was now lost to time, but the experience from that battle was still fresh in her mind. Ubiquital mist allowed the caster to create a replication before battle, then regenerate either the original or the replication at will. Unlike the separate body skill, only one of the 2 bodies could retain its own free will, but it could still prove to be one truly heinous ability in the right hands. There was no better way to catch an enemy off guard, and while it wasn't as effective against cautious opponents, it offered the user a great deal of insurance. Velgrynd's parallel existence skill could create those separate bodies at will, which undeniably made it stronger than ubiquital mist. But Testarossa wasn't aware of that, a shade of doubt now present upon her beautiful face. Carrera asked, "What's that?" Testarossa explained, "Rain, you see, can split her body and regenerate herself from part of either one." Ultima checked her understanding. "Got it. So both of them can function as the real her then?" Testarossa answered, "That would be the case, yes. Testarossa and her friends analyzed the situation, not falling into panic at all. The battle was technically underway, but they were still debating like this was a parlor chit-chat over tea. Velgrynd coyly remarked, "I see Blanc is quite the intelligent one, you are correct. This is parallel existence, one of my powers. And since I don't want you interfering with the ritual, I will be happy to deal with you here." She gracefully fluttered a feathered fan as she spoke. Testarossa was less than amused as she sneered at her. "I have a name. It is Testarossa, and it was granted to me by my lord Rimuru. I do wish you would stop calling me Blanc." She casually cracked the flaming whip that she had produced from her hand at some point. It undulated like a snake as it struck at Velgrynd. Velgrynd asked, "Ah, right. So that slime truly did name you Primals?" This was Velgrynd's first confirmation of the fact, and it visibly surprised her. But her motions remained undisturbed as she nimbly dodged Testarossa's whip. Carrera indignantly explained, "Calling my lord a mere slime is extremely rude." Carrera unleashed her own magic, Gravity Collapse, her closing move at the very start. She kept the size as small as possible, but that only further expanded its power. It was the greatest attack Carrera could summon right now, and it struck Velgrynd head-on while her attention was still on Testarossa. A pillar of black enveloped Velgrynd, connected from heaven to earth, a prison big enough for just one, offering no escape to its quarry. But with a wry grin, Velgrynd remained supremely unconcerned within her hypergravity cell. "You truly do reign supreme among demons. I couldn't ask for much more magic force. But if you insist on following the laws of this world, you will never outclass a true dragon." As if to prove her point, Velgrynd shattered the jet-black column from the inside. Then she raised her own magical force to jam Carrera's magic, rendering her powerless. Carrera laughed it off. "Sir Veldora's sister is something of a jokester herself, I see. If magic doesn't work, I suppose I can't do too much, huh? Well, there are the sword skills Agira taught me, aren't there? Might not do much, but let's give it a try." Even though the greatest trick in her book was effortlessly broken through, Carrera still seemed to be enjoying herself. There was no sign of her losing heart as she held up her magic-generated blade. It had a fierce, violent presence, one slightly unbecoming of a demon, and Carrera's own demonic aura flowed into it, making it glow in her hand. Testarossa said, "That's probably the right answer. If it's a technique you yourself have crafted, not a simple magic spell or skill, then it may even strike a true dragon, the core of the world. Sir Veldora told me that a woman named Hinata proved it to him once. Testarossa didn't need to test it out. She presumed magic wouldn't work on Velgrynd. That was why she used a magically generated flame whip from the very beginning. It was white in color, imbued with a freezing flame of ivory, an accursed contradiction in attributes that Testarossa herself invented." Ultima mused, "Humans are real fascinating, huh? In that case, maybe I ought to break these out too." Ultima materialized 2 knives, one in each hand. The blades were a loathsome dark purple, letting out an eerie, mystical aura. Carrera asked, "Wasting no time either, are you, Ult?" "You hurt Zegian with those earlier, didn't you?" Ultima replied, "Pretty much. Honestly, I didn't see much point moving my own body to defeat him, but..." Testarossa noted, "Surprising though, I didn't think our combat experience with Sir Zegian would come in handy like this. Magic was the main strength of this trio. They never put much emphasis on close combat. But in the battle against Zegian, no other method of attack seemed to work, thanks to his wall-like defenses and absolute superiority over all types of magic. Almost no spell worked on Zegian, and as a result they had to seek out other means. This was their answer. Only by putting their own spiritual life forms on the line and harnessing their own tenacious wills for their attacks did they succeed in inflicting damage on Zegian. For a spiritual life form, the power of will outclasses anything else. A skill is simply another form of the user's will, created from their own desire, and an ultimate skill is the final destination that desire may reach. The demonesses wanted to see how close they could reach with their own skills, and as they concluded, there was no other option but to try it out. So, through embodying their wills, they had each come up with weapons suited uniquely for them. Zegian's own defenses worked just as well on ultimate skills, but still, Ultima's knives managed to inflict a wound on his body. This was important, for it meant that the three demonesses' attacks were ultimate in nature. Carrera said, "I tried to imitate Ult's weapon, you know? My swordsmanship is really just for fun, but Agira's taught me full mastery anyway. Let's go, shall we?" Carrera sprinted forward, slashing at Velgrynd with all her might without even considering defense. Velgrynd parried the slashes with her feathered fan, a high-grade work of art that could hardly be called a weapon. With its durability irrevocably altered by her magical energy, however, it was now harder than diamond. Thin, light, flowing, and tough, it was Velgrynd's favorite weapon, easily comparable with Carrera's sword. Velgrynd remarked, "What a surprise. I didn't expect the Primal Demons to so readily abandon magic like that." Testarossa answered, "Is it that surprising? Our pride is a small price to pay for a victory we can offer to our lord." Velgrynd, already on the defensive against Carrera's onslaught, was struck by Testarossa's whip. Like a horde of white serpents, the whip constantly changed its shape and direction as it hunted down its prey. Velgrynd clicked her tongue. The whip had torn the hem of her dress, offering a glimpse of her beautiful legs, and on one of them a bright red welt, clear for all to see. It proved that Testarossa's attack worked. Carrera said, "Not bad, Testa." "I'll stay on the vanguard, so keep up the good work for me," Velgrynd asked. "You're celebrating a fluke of a hit that much." Even after this light injury, Velgrynd still felt in control. That's why, facing up against Testarossa and her friends, she made a terrible mistake. She let her guard down. Ultima's triumphant cry rang out. "It's not a fluke!" Velgrynd felt an intense pain in her side. For a moment, Velgrynd was confused. Then, as if aiming for that moment, Testarossa's whip and Carrera's sword struck over and over, taking turns. Velgrynd fell to her knees, not immediately aware of what happened to her. Not that she couldn't comprehend it, she just didn't want to. Testarossa said, "Spectacular work, Ultima. We'll need to have Sir Rimuru praise us for it later." Carrera agreed. "Very impressive, yeah, but we can't let our guard down." "Now it's time to wrap it up," Ultima added. Right. The other separate body is still around. Let's defeat that too, and then let's interrupt that ritual." Velgrynd, hearing these voices far in the distance, stood up. Ultima wondered, "Oh, after all that, did it still not do much damage?" Testarossa answered, "Your poisoned curses take time for even us to reverse. The true dragons are extremely powerful," Carrera said. "But she doesn't feel so unbeatable now, huh? The damage has to be building up. If we keep going." Before Ultima could finish, Velgrynd went on the move. With speed that not even the demoness's super senses could catch up with, she grabbed Ultima by the neck and slammed her to the ground. Ultima groaned, "Gah!" Velgrynd unleashed a stomping kick on her, then leaped away just before Carrera's sword slash whizzed through her position. Velgrynd, safely out of Carrera's range, pulled out a knife stuck to her side and cast it aside. Her clothes were still torn, but there were no wounds left on her pale skin. Any damage caused by this barrage was no big deal to her. Carrera muttered, "She really is a monster." Velgrynd lightly replied, a bit self-mocking in tone, "Not exactly. In fact, I'm not nearly good enough yet. I haven't felt the sensation of being taken off guard for years and years. Then again, perhaps I've been doing that on a regular basis, but never realized it because I never paid a price. I suppose it's a problem only the best of the best must face, but I'm sure you understand what I mean, don't you?" Velgrynd smiled, but her eyes cast a sharp gaze at them, making sure no twitch or slight movement went undetected. The demonesses couldn't hope for her to be so careless a second time, and with that, all hope for their victory seemed to be lost. Velgrynd continued, "I always thought primal demons were nasty things, but not in terms of being a threat. They're just a pain to deal with. But now I see things differently. With your new names and physical bodies, you have surpassed my wildest dreams in strength. That much I must acknowledge." Velgrynd had no intention of dismissing the primal demons as unworthy. Their strength in battle didn't outclass hers, but working in groups paid off for them, an ability that would no doubt work well against Velzard, her sister. In fact, Velgrynd was taken by surprise just now. If that happened in battle against her sister, it would have marked a decisive defeat for her. That much was proven by how that last attack from Testarosa's team had just ruined her separate body. It would recover over time, but as Carrera said, disabling Ultima's poisoned curse on the body would be a painstaking task even for Velgrynd. So she disabled the damaged separate body and conjured up a new one, and then all the damage was undone. That was the real trick behind parallel existence. No matter what kind of unfamiliar technique you use to kill off a body, it ultimately meant nothing before Velgrynd's authority. But not even this authority is limitless. There were still restrictions, more or less. The biggest was that each separate body occupied 10% of the user's maximum magicule count as a sort of collateral. This was not consumed, but functioned as a kind of maintenance fee, and as the term collateral suggests, it came back to the user once the body was extinguished. However, only so many bodies could be created. That was an incontrovertible fact. Velgrynd could create a maximum of 10, but, of course, this would take up 100% of her magicule count, reducing her ability to fight. Magicules could be shared between bodies, and Velgrynd figured it would be most efficient to leave at least half of her magicules free at any given time. That's why she kept it to 3 or 4 at the most. That, and there was another limitation related to how much damage each body could receive. If a body was deactivated without any damage, the user would regain 10% of their magicules. If it was damaged, however, the amount returned would be proportionally less depending on the extent of the damage. Rimuru had anticipated as much in his strategy, and in a sense, he was right. With the damage taken, Velgrynd had lost 5% of her magicules. By comparison, Gravity Collapse, the nuclear-level strike that required Carrera's full force to unleash, wouldn't even absorb 1% of Velgrynd's magicule count. That was how much the true dragons had to work with. So while Velgrynd appeared invincible at first glance, she was far from immortal. She could ignore pretty much all physical damage, but if you slowly, steadily drained her energy, it'd be possible to defeat her sooner or later. The probability was still incredibly small, but it was one Velgrynd remained aware of, and considering these were 3 of the strongest fighters in the world, she really did think they had a chance against her. Calling them no threat to her was just a bluff, a bit of psychological warfare. Now Velgrynd was sure of it. If everything went well, these 3 demonesses could serve as a deciding factor in her next battle against Velzard. If they could join the fight against her sister, victory was all but assured. That was why she decided to solicit them one more time. Velgrynd made her largest concession. You understand now, don't you? No matter how much you struggle, you could never defeat me. Don't you think further battle is pointless? All you have to do is help me a little, and I will guarantee your freedom after that. So do you mind surrendering for now, please? This was the largest concession that Velgrynd's pride would allow her to offer, but it was met with instant rejection. Testarosa said, "You want us to betray Sir Rimuru? My, what a funny joke." Ultima answered, "You're definitely not taking us seriously. Demons never break their contracts, you know that, right? Just because it's not looking good for us doesn't mean we'll change sides at the drop of a hat." Carrera finished it. "Absolutely. And sure, maybe you could try bargaining with some demons. If you look hard enough, I bet you could find some driven by their own self-interests enough to say yes. But you should realize that I would never betray my lord." Testarosa, Ultima, and Carrera each expressed their feelings in their own words and then in their own actions as they unleashed an unhinged barrage upon Velgrynd. Each one was maximum force, instantly destroying her separate body. Once again, Velgrynd was drained of 9% of her magicules. The negotiations were off. Velgrynd, generating a new body, flashed a lurid smile as she spoke. Ah, what a shame. A real shame. And then the rampage began. So Gazel and his team decided to attack the area where Kigali was conducting the ritual, bypassing the gravity collapse-driven pillar of crimson that was raining blood from the sky above. Getting too close to it would catch them in the gravitational waves, Pegasus Knight or not, and as their leader, it was Dolph's duty to keep watch and lead the way. This Velgrynd-engineered gravity collapse, after all, was completely impervious to anything happening around it. Testarosa and the other demons seemed to be locked in combat with Velgrynd on the ground, but the Crimson Pillar remained as present as ever. The fact sent a chill down Gazel's spine, but he didn't show it as he shouted.
I can hardly believe it, but that is Velgrynd. You must think that her producing a separate body on the same level as her main one is the stuff of nightmares, don't you? But fear not, know that we too have powerful reinforcements that defy all common sense.
His voice reached his knights, bold and majestic as it removed any sense of fear from their hearts. Even Gazel, to tell the truth, was terrified. A saint-level knight would be capable of little against such an overwhelming presence. Any attempt at resistance would fizzle out against such a huge difference in power, but Gazel did not give up. His sense of responsibility as king galvanized his heart, but most of all, these unexpected reinforcements from his former fellow trainee showed that it was still far too early to despair. In terms of magicule count alone, the 3 demonesses lost out to Gazel, but here they were, boldly challenging an opponent whose power must be nearly 100 times greater than theirs. Gazel privately chuckled to himself. Faced with their exploits, a king like him could hardly afford to whine about his lot. Such was the vow he made to himself, and that resolve was now spreading to his advisors and the knights under their command. By the time they reached their destination, fear no longer registered with any of them. Their destination awaited beyond the Crimson Pillar, a wide-open meadow accessible enough for a large army to occupy. The ground was stained with blood, the final end of the composite division, no doubt, after all their double dealing. In this vast area stood around 100 people. One of them stood out, thanks to the different uniform he was wearing. It was Lieutenant Kondo, his presence overwhelming as he shot a look toward Gazel. With him was Footman Tyr, and 36 or so of Yuki's former companions. They were joined by nearly 50 Imperial Guardians. They were spread out in formation to protect Kigali, ensuring she wasn't disturbed during the ritual. Over toward Kondo was another uniformed group, members of the Imperial Information Bureau, although several of them were Guardians as well. Essentially, these were the best forces the Empire had to offer right now, all in one place. Kigali was located on the outer edge of the Crimson Pillar, immersed in the ritual even as she was doused in the downpour of blood. Velgrynd was standing nearby, watching over her. After creating that separate body on the other side of the pillar, she had returned here so the 3 demonesses wouldn't interfere with the magic spell. Even for Velgrynd, conjuring such a large-scale incantation required the full attention of her main body. An alternate wouldn't cut it. Thanks to that, she appeared in no hurry to join the upcoming battle, instead choosing to watch it from afar, and Gazel could see that for himself. So they began their descent, slow and relaxed. Kondo greeted them on the ground. "I am honored to meet you, King Gazel. The legends of your heroism precede you." Gazel snorted and raised his sword.
And you are?
Kondo answered, "Lieutenant Kondo, Director of the Imperial Intelligence Bureau."
Ah, the figure stalking the halls of information, as they say. Interesting. I will handle you myself. On guard.
A glance was all it took for Gazel to recognize Kondo's skill. He attempted read thought against him the moment he sized him up. And it didn't work, a clear sign they were at least equals in skill. Vaughn tried to step in. Whoa, allow me to...
Enough, Vaughn. You handle the others so they don't get in our way, and all of you as well. I'm the only one here who can take this man.
Gazel was addressing all his advisors now, the team about to wage this final battle together. Jane was the first to nod her approval. Jane said, yes, that man is clearly more than we can handle. Let us clear away the other obstacles at least so King Gazel may fight in peace. Dolph nodded. Very well. Everyone, listen to me. We may outnumber them, but never underestimate their powers. Form groups of 5 and roll out for aerial combat. Sizing up the enemy, he began to issue precise orders to his team. The Pegasus Knights were gifted at assaulting targets from the sky, free of all obstruction. But this time, their strategy called for using their superior numbers to hassle and distract the enemy. Whether Yuki's old friends or members of the Imperial Guardians, every one of them was powerful enough to be considered enlightened. That would rank a special A in the threat level scale used by the Free Guild. Comparable in strength to archdemons. With the right training, any of them could be potential Demon Lord seeds. Right now, they were all champions of humanity. Dolph's troops, when teamed with a flying mount, were only over A by comparison. Dolph himself was an enlightened, and some of the Pegasus Knights stood out from the others, but he didn't see any of them beating any foe here one-on-one. This wasn't the product of statistical reasoning. He just had a feeling the enemy forces here were that dangerous. They had a better chance of beating them instead of Velgrynd, but he still didn't think they could win this fight any normal way. That was the reason behind his orders. They weren't here to annihilate the enemy, but rather to use the aerial advantage to distract them. That, Dolph hoped, would buy them enough time and keep Gazel from having to turn his attention elsewhere. The Pegasus Knights thankfully picked up on this without hesitation. Dolph put his faith in Gazel's victory and in his own duty to make that victory possible. Besides, they would have more troops soon. That belief was quickly affirmed by an energetic voice.
It seems we are slightly late. This big oaf was heavier than I expected, so lugging it around took a mighty effort. But now that we are here, everything is fine. So sit back and let your concerns fly away as you enjoy this battle.
It was Gabiru. Team Hiryu cheered him on. Whew! Nice one, Sir Gabiru. Looking good. Another follower chimed in, indeed. A third called out, you're more manly than ever now. And we'll follow you wherever you go, so you better be ready for us. He had brought along his biggest fans in Team Hiryu, each carrying a chain attached to a huge object, the Demon Colossus, so oversized that it required 100 people to transport it by air. Its size was no problem as it patiently awaited labyrinth runners down below. But when it came time to travel to the battlefield, the sheer weight was something of a hindrance. In combat, it was a tried and true menace. It was just very, very slow. It was a problem, but one overlooked before now since it was quick enough in melee combat. Veldora was bursting with enthusiasm. This will need to be addressed, but now that you've brought it this far, I'll do the very best I can. He eagerly climbed into the Demon Colossus, itching to score some on-the-field kills with it. As he did, he turned his eyes toward Kondo, only to immediately avert them. King Gazel was engaging him, and he didn't think it was his place to interfere. He turned to look at Velgrynd. Veldora realized the marshal was Velgrynd the Flame Dragon all along. But in that case, it was hard to tell what Demrada's aim was. Did he truly swear his allegiance to His Majesty the Emperor? Why did he need to order Bernie's troop to protect Masayuki? It made no sense, but now was no time to stew over it. If Velgrynd made any moves, this operation was over. Veldora would have to keep an eye on her to make sure that didn't happen. With that in mind, Veldora directed the Demon Colossus toward Velgrynd as she gracefully stood there. Seeing him go, Gabiru flew up next to Dolph.
It appears Sir Veldora has signed up to engage with Lady Velgrynd. We will mop up anyone in the way as discussed.
Dolph laughed. How reassuring to hear, Sir Gabiru. Ready for a joint operation then?
Indeed. We will go up front and engage the enemy. I leave the back up to you.
Dolph answered, you may. Gabiru and Dolph exchanged nods. As agreed upon beforehand, Team Hiryu would take charge with their superior combat ability. The Dragon Youths boasted excellent defenses. Killing any one of them would never be easy, and each one was generously granted a full potion to boot. Anything that didn't kill them instantly was totally survivable, so they'd function just fine as their shields.
Right, Sir Dolph, you take command.
Dolph exclaimed, wait, what?
I am Gabiru, the Dracolord. Prepare to die.
But Gabiru paid the confused Dolph no further mind as he made his charge toward his target, one of the men they thought was associated with Kondo. Gobwa looked on in amazement at Gabiru. Her team was the last to arrive, but that was understandable, given that they were the only land-based force to speak of. They still boasted over A speed, however, and they reached the battlefield just as hostilities began. They had even maneuvered themselves behind the enemy just as planned. Gobwa said, if Sir Gabiru is challenging that man solo, he must be extraordinarily powerful, I imagine. The man next to her refuted the idea. You think? He looks like a wimpy guy in glasses to me. The type good at clerical work. This was Phobio, the Black Leopard Fang and member of the 3 Lycanthropiers. He never did return home once all was said and done, and now he found himself following Gobwa into battle. Gobwa was secretly happy about that. But she also had Team Kurenai to run, a post granted by Benamaru, and thus she had a duty to maintain military dignity. Gobwa said, Sir Phobio, your abilities are beyond reproach, but I think you need to learn how to better evaluate your enemy. Phobio replied, Wow, Gobwa, so harsh. Just Phobio is fine. I'm no stranger to you. Gobwa kept her formality. We are on a wartime mission. It is important to maintain operational formality. This talk looked like nothing more than friendly flirting to the people serving them. They were stuck in a tense battlefield, but for some reason there was an odd warmth in the air. Phobio suddenly turned serious. So what are we doing now? Gobwa replied, herself switching gears. We will stay here and wait for the right moment. Achieving our tactical objective here is no longer possible. The operation is already a failure. Depending on Lady Velgryn's moves, all of us could be wiped out. If our focus was survival, then fleeing is our only viable option, but we haven't been granted that choice. For now, we must reduce the number of obstacles in our way and lighten Sir Rimuru's burden as much as possible. It took true resolve to make that statement. If Velgrynd could be kept here, Rimuru could use that opportunity to strike down Emperor Ludora, or make him agree to a peace deal. That was the key to all of this. But the moment Velgrynd started sending out copies of herself with parallel existence, the operation was doomed. Normally, they should have suspended everything at that point, but anyone with enough authority to make that call was currently out of contact. Gabiru was supreme commander at the moment, and he wanted to keep this going. Testarossa and the demons agreed with him, and Gobwa had no objection. They would do what they could. That was all there was to it. It was unclear just how many other Velgrynds she could create, but they were prepared to stop them all in their tracks and, if possible, stop Kigali from completing the ritual she was engaged in. Phobio asked, "You trying to get yourself killed?" Gobwa answered, "No. His Majesty Sir Rimuru would never allow us to die. That's why I refuse to accept any casualties today." The Team Hear You members all nodded at this fairly absurd order. Phobio pressed her. "But if Velgrynd goes on the move, you've got nothing to stop her, yeah?" Gobwa replied. "If it comes to it, we will run and leave it in Lord Ghidora's hands." Gobwa gave Phobio a wink. It had enough destructive force to stop him in his tracks. Phobio relented. "Well, all right. I'll just turn off my brain and stir up a little dust then. I see someone I want to settle a score with too, so I better go say hello." Phobio had gone through the painful experience of being tricked by footmen in Tira before. But he didn't resent them for it. His own inexperience was to blame. In fact, he was even thankful for the opportunity to grow from it. That was his simple, cheerful approach to life, befitting the beastman he was, and it made him feel for his nemesis now that he saw him being manipulated like this. Gobwa warned him, "Don't do anything rash." Phobio answered, "I can't promise that I won't, but I swear I'll make an effort not to die." With those words, Phobio joined the fight. Lieutenant Kondo was up against King Gazel. Gabiru was eyeing a bespectacled Imperial intelligence officer. Vaughn and Henrietta were squared up against Footman and Tyr. Phobio was about to join the fray while Gobwa and her team were working out their next move. Finally, Velgrynd, glowering over the battlefield, caught sight of the demon colossus piloted by Ghidorah. And thus each battle began. Meanwhile on the battlefield, Gazel's mind was as quiet as a passing breeze. He was facing Kondo now, not as a king, but as a warrior and accomplished sword fighter. Kondo, following Gazel's instructions, drew his military sword. He was just as quiet, letting out an admiring exhale at Gazel's stance. Huh. Very impressive. They don't call you master of the sword for nothing. This was more than mere flattery. He was being sincere with him, but Gazel just snickered back.
Nonsense. Coming from you, it sounds like nothing but sarcasm.
That too was sincere. He said it because Kondo's stance was also a beauty to behold, no visible holes to it at all. He was holding his sword with both hands, deadly serious and never letting his guard down, quite a different approach from the one he took with Footman. Even more surprising, he and Gazel were assuming a totally identical fighting stance, as if they had arranged it ahead of time. The two of them crossed swords silently a couple of times, gaining a grasp of each other's abilities. It was clear to both that their similar stances were no coincidence. Gazel learned his swordsmanship under Hakuro, and he still followed Hakuro's teachings for the core of his style, although he mixed in some of his own techniques as well. This was the Oboro, or crest water. a style that was handed down from Hakuro's grandfather by Akuya Araki. And no one but Hakuro was teaching this style now. Even Gazel, a student of the Crestwater style, didn't know everything about it. He knew there were still secrets and techniques to it yet to be discovered. But as the official instructor of the Monster Nation, Hakuro was deeply involved with the training of all its soldiers. That included hammering the basics of swordsmanship into them all naturally, but it was unlikely the Empire was aware of this. Besides, swordsmanship wasn't something you could just pick up overnight, so Gazel decided to ask the question. But as he did, Kondo spoke up as well. Kondo asked, "Why do you know the Oboro style stance like that?"
I had my suspicions after hearing about you, but your technique is similar to my own Crestwater. Who did you learn it from?
For a moment, both men fell silent. They glared at each other. Gazel was the first to respond.
Oboro? Are you saying that Oboro is different from Crestwater?
Kondo pondered the question for a moment, his expression the same as always. The information Kondo had indicated that in the Dwarven Kingdom they preferred an orthodox approach to swordsmanship, a blade in one hand and a shield in the other. Did that connect to this? He didn't have much information to work with, but Kondo was still close to the right answer. But his silence was making Gazel impatient.
Are you not going to answer me?
Kondo answered, "Don't hurry me, please. Your Crestwater style is likely in the same lineage as what I have learned. That's why I wanted to ask you back. There's no way this nearly identical sword school just happened to develop on its own in this world too, is there?" Gazel muttered as he recalled the stories he heard of Hakuro's grandfather during training.
Likely not. Sir Hakuro, my master, told me that Crestwater was taught to him by his grandfather. He was a visitor from another world, apparently, and I imagine that explains this.
Unbeknownst to Gazel and Kondo, Byakuya Araki actually had a younger brother. This was the man who introduced what he called Oboro to Japan, the world Kondo was born in. It was half sword style, half mystical art, meant to dispel evil and fend off ghouls and monsters. Kondo had been tapped to be just such a demon hunter, and as part of that he learned what was called the Oboro Shinmei-ryu style in Japan, a style very close to Araki's original teachings. Kondo looked genuinely amused, a rare thing to see from him. Funny to see we belong to the same school. He usually never revealed his emotions, so his chuckling seemed all the more ominous. Kondo said, "Your Majesty, I have a proposal for you."
What is that?
Kondo made the offer. "As a fellow Oboro user, I offer you my friendship. I see that you are more than strong enough to join our side, my lord. If you disarm yourself and swear your allegiance to the Emperor, I promise to cease all acts of aggression against your country at once."
And you think I would accept that offer?
Kondo answered, "I do, because if you give it rational thought, you'll see it as the best way to minimize the damage." Kondo was right, Gazel thought. In fact, he couldn't hope for a better offer. If he wanted to protect the people of the Dwarven Kingdom, saying yes was absolutely the right thing to do. As a monarch, he needed to accept it without any further hesitation. Now that he knew what sort of threat Velgrynd was, there was just no way they could win. Their whole objective for this battle was nebulous, hard to grasp, and they should never have attempted it at all. It was all based on the wishful thinking that Rimuru's group would settle things with Ludora before any major damage was done. Gazel considered his own people. But before he could finish that thought, he smiled, shaking off his hesitation.
Ridiculous. If you think you've already won, then you have no idea how dangerous letting your guard down is. Such a conceited way of thinking. I'll teach you a lesson about that.
With that shout, Gazel focused on the enemy in front of him. All distractions were banished. The defeat of Kondo was the only thing on his mind. Then, with his brain, body, and beloved sword working as one, he unleashed his saint-level force at full throttle. The result was a true champion, one who could almost reach the level of an awakened demon lord. And yet, despite seeing Gazel in that state, Kondo remained as relaxed as ever. Kondo said, "Oh brother, not as wise as they said you were, are you? Then so be it. Allow me to give you a final lesson before your fame crashes to the ground." The words signaled the beginning of a battle between two saints. Several minutes passed. Kondo had the upper hand. He had no problem dispelling the heroic aura that Gazel released. Running a similar type of spiritual force across his own body canceled all its effects. But even in terms of pure swordsmanship, the difference was clear. Gazel unleashed a skill called Crestwater Thundering Heavens, a series of vertical slashes, yet with some nimble moves of his own. Kondo fought back with Shippu Raya, a horizontal cleaving technique. This was followed up with Shiden Tatsu, the fastest thrusting move in his arsenal, but Gazel parried it with his own Crestwater slash. They were members from the same school, so they knew each other's techniques very well. But little by little, Gazel's reaction times began lagging. Kondo had mastered more techniques than Gazel. Kondo said, "Just as I thought. Crestwater features some techniques that are unknown outside of its own school. Even I, as close as I am to the original lineage, do not know all of them." Hakuro was his name, you said? I had my doubts over just how well a mere monster could ever understand the true nature of the blade. Kondo was being honest, but he didn't intend to mock Hakuro at all. The way of the sword was a profound one indeed, passed down from generation to generation uninterrupted. Kondo was proud of his own school, and that's why he said what he did. But the comment touched a nerve with Gazel.
You dare insult my master.
He glared at Kondo, his expression even fiercer than before. And then another person joined them.
If that, King Gazel, is enough to disturb you on the battlefield, I see you still need quite a bit more training. Go cool your head over there while I take over for a little while.
Hakuro, part of the rear guard as Gabwa's advisor, arrived on the scene. Kondo looked at Hakuro, instantly recognizing his abilities. The next moment, the piercing clang of steel against steel echoed through the air. Kondo drew his sword and struck with a classical Iaido move. Hakuro used his own hidden sword to catch it. Kondo asked, "Oh, you can catch this?" Heaven Gaze, Hakuro's third eye, was open on his forehead. It had now surpassed the framework of an extra skill, even going beyond the realm of unique skills, and it allowed him to keep up with Kondo's sword drawing.
A brilliant piece of work. But you share in the same school as my grandfather? Strange bedfellows indeed. You may call me a monster, but why don't you see for yourself just how well I understand the true meaning of the sword?
Kondo answered, "Hey, interesting. If you're that insistent about it, let me show you just how good I am." Thus began the battle between Kondo and Hakuro, with Gazel there to watch. Kondo liked his chances. There was no denying Hakuro's abilities. That much he could tell at a glance. But it was an unquestionable fact from his point of view that no monster could understand the true nature of a sword. Oboro Shinmei Ryu, after all, was a style invented for the purposes of combat against demons. It should have been naturally repellent to monsters, and there's no way a monster could master it. That conclusion seemed totally natural to Kondo. What's more, there was no way anyone could imagine that the true founder of Oboro Shinmei Ryu, the elder brother of the school's creator, would be in this world in the first place. Kondo believed Hakuro could use the school's innermost techniques, and that was beyond his expectations. But anything beyond that was only passed down to members of the original family. He didn't know how capable this visitor was, but it would be impossible for him to impart Oboro's innermost secret moves to a monster. It was perhaps inevitable that Kondo would use his common sense to come up with that judgment. But it was a big mistake, a rare unadvised assumption on his part, and the cost of making it would be high. Hakuro and Kondo squared up against each other. The moment they were within killing range, they simultaneously launched their attacks. Kondo began, Baika, Goka Tatsu. Staking his pride as a swordsman, Kondo showed off his well-trained technique. It was a foolish move to make, and he had the temerity for it only because Hakuro was in the same school as him. He thought, in one corner of his mind, that he needed to wrap up this duel quickly and efficiently, but the move he chose would do nothing for that. It was a violent outburst, well out of character for the normally calm, collected Kondo. He wanted to show his prowess to his peers in this world by breaking out the best techniques he knew from the start. Gokutatsu was a stabbing technique meant to symbolize a plum blossom. It was one of the loftiest techniques Kondo was taught, a closely kept secret that would never be found outside of his own school. A 5-strike move, it aimed at 5 of the 10 vital points of the human body: the eyes, throat, heart, kidneys, solar plexus, groin, and, as a diversion, the shoulders. What it aimed at could be changed depending on the current situation, requiring skillful technique to pull off. Few of his fellow swordsmen had mastered this art, and that's why unleashing it against Hakuro was a miscalculation.
Multi-layered blossom flash.
Hakuro countered with the greatest of his own secret techniques, a continual, flowing strike that slashed the enemy 8 times in an instant in any of 1,000 different combinations. Kondo and Hakuro were equal in level, but there was a big difference in their core fighting abilities. By Hakuro's reckoning, Kondo was dozens of times more physically gifted than him. If this skill didn't work, in essence, Hakuro's defeat was all but certain. It was with that resolve in mind that he drew his sword. Kondo grunted, Hakuro answered with a low sound.
Oh.
Kondo was aiming to overwhelm his foe. Hakuro wanted to deliver a fatal blow, even if he had to go along for the ride. That's what both were hoping for with this clash of skills, but both of them wound up off the mark. Hakuro's blade slashed 8 times, like a multi-layered cherry blossom shedding its buds, faster than any regular person could see. But they were offset by Kondo's 5 plum petals, failing to reach their destination. Kondo reared back, and thanks to that, Hakuro only managed to graze his cheek. Even that, however, was an unfortunate result from Kondo's point of view. Kondo admitted, "I never thought there was a swordsman in this world who could surpass me." Hakuro's Blossom Flash was superior as a technique to Kondo's Gokatotsu. That fact shattered all preconceptions for Kondo, forcing him to admit his mistake. But it was still Kondo who won the duel. Hakuro was brilliant up to the point where he offset Kondo's technique. But the difference in power was too great. The clash just now had cut Hakuro's arms to gruesome ribbons, rendering them useless.
Not even the most powerful of my moves could reach you.
Kondo replied, "No, it did. Allow me to apologize for looking down on you. That, and I wish to ask, what was your grandfather's name?" Kondo was sorry for looking down on Hakuro as a monster. He wanted to pay his respect to this man, now clearly a better swordsman than he. When it came to the blade, at least, he was a sincere person, but at the same time, he never judged matters based on his personal feelings. That was how Tatsuya Kondo worked.
My grandfather was named Byakuya Araki, a swordsman without equal, but he sadly left us for the afterlife long ago.
Kondo answered, "A pity." And Araki is the surname of the head family of Oboro Shinmei-ryu. He may have been related to the founder indeed. If he had at least reached the level of enlightened, he surely would have been one of the most powerful people in the world. Kondo offered him a silent word of prayer. When it came to his own sword school, he was all business. Hakuro looked down on him and sighed.
My grandfather was an eccentric man, you see. He preferred to live life at his own pace. But do you think you could step aside for now?
Hakuro decided to risk the question, sensing Kondo's respect for him. But it was not to be. Kondo answered, "I will ensure you are protected, but I cannot stop this war. The way I see it, the worst thing you can do is take half measures." Kondo was nonchalant in his reply. Hakuro assumed as much. He was in no panic about it anyway. Hakuro already knew he was going to lose. He would never make it back to the battlefront with these arms, but he supposed he had done what he set out to do. No, Hakuro's goal here was not victory, but rather to show Gazel how he fought against Kondo. If Gazel Dwargo, master of the sword, could see Hakuro's innermost skills in action, he would be able to understand them and make them his own. Even if he didn't learn it all immediately, he'd certainly receive some hints at least. And what's more, Kondo revealed a secret move of his own, and that would improve Gazel's chances as well.
I suppose I am done here then. No need for further protection. I have zero intention of living in disgrace. If my last moments are nigh, I want to take as many enemy soldiers as possible along with me. But now is not the time. For now, I need to concentrate on healing these hands.
They were gravely wounded, beyond what even a full potion could heal. One of the deepest secrets of battle will involved permeating a target with one's own fighting spirit to destroy it, and Kondo's spirit had penetrated Hakuro's defenses during combat. The only way for Hakuro to heal them was to neutralize the force with his own aura. but Hakuro looked unaffected as he turned toward Gazel.
Now, King Gazel, have you cooled down yet?
Of course. Seeing your techniques in motion astounded me, my master.
I actually did not intend to teach you that, but I wasn't in any position to hold back. The rest, I leave up to you.
Yes, master.
Hakuro stepped back as Gazel stood in front of Kondo. Then he slipped away from the front lines, holding his head high as if his part of the war was now over. Now Kondo and Gazel were facing each other again. Kondo, still ashamed of his own shallowness, mentally flipped the page. Kondo said, "I suppose I lost my cool a little. That's enough playtime for now, though. Time to get back to work."
I hate to say it, but I agree with you. I must live up to my master's expectations, and so I will give it my all.
Kondo and Gazel both looked different from before. They knew each other's full abilities now, and they were serious about this. Gazel was grateful to Hakuro. If he'd kept fighting Kondo earlier, his defeat would have been inevitable. The secret Goka Tatsu move Kondo used would have been impossible to defend at first sight. Even if it miraculously failed to fatally wound him, Kondo's fighting spirit would have destroyed him from the inside like it did with Hakuro, rendering him incapable of fighting. Gazel didn't realize all that driven fighting spirit could be so much of a threat. He knew that was one of Battle Will's most powerful secret techniques, but perhaps he hadn't fully understood it before now. Gazel felt a bit uplifted as he reflected on this. There was still room for him to grow.
Kondo was your name, wasn't it? Well, enjoy having a taste of my full powers.
As soon as he said it, Gazel released his own secret move.
Spirit Summon. Elemental Lord of the Nameless Earth, come to me.
Unleashing his power as a saint, Gazel invited the Earth Elemental Lord to ensconce itself in his body. They were fully unified now, and they had energy stores that rivaled or even exceeded that of an ancient awakened demon lord. It operated on a strict time limit, but it was still Gazel's ace in the hole. But Kondo was unfazed. Ridiculous. Even exposed to Gazel's onrush of energy, Kondo remained calm. Gazel didn't show any displeasure at this, holding his sword forward. Sharpening his mind, he let the will flow within him, pouring it into his blade. Gazel now had perfect control over the vast amounts of energy being unified with the Earth Elemental Lord granted to him. It was a feeling unlike anything he had experienced before. Gazel praised Hakuro in his heart. "Well done, Master. You allowed me to tap into the innermost workings of this school, did you not? Now, I can win. I can reach even greater heights than ever before." He could feel his mind, his heart, and his body all rise up. His mind itself was a skill, energized with his full mastery of the unique skill Tyrant. His skills were an art, the art of Crestwater as taught by Hakuro, capable of converting spiritual energy to physical force. Right now, Gazel could use it to gather all the energy coursing through his body and focus it on a single target. Tyrant allowed him to put it all together, letting it grow into the best possible strike he could manage. He was sure no one could defeat his sword, and now he made his move. A strike of divine speed. But it never reached Kondo. There was a small bang, and Gazel fell to his knees with a clatter. Blood poured out of his mouth as he looked down, dumbfounded at the red streak spreading across his stomach. Kondo's Nambu semi-automatic handgun was in his right hand, a cloud of gunpowder smoke billowing from it. The bullet that felled Gazel had been fired from that very gun.
Where is your pride as a swordsman?
Gazel spat out blood as he spoke, his face contorted with anger and humiliation. But Kondo couldn't have cared less. Kondo answered coldly, "I told you I was done with playtime. Pride is useless in a battle. My duty is to win by any means necessary." His voice was cold, a completely different tone from the person so concerned with his sword technique a moment ago.
Nonsense. This much won't be the end of me.
Gazel tried to stand up, a look of desperation on his face. But he couldn't move his body the way he wanted, and soon he was on the ground again. And no wonder. It was no mere bullet Kondo shot him with, but a Necrosis bullet, a special type that contained Kondo's own will. It wasn't driven by something he borrowed from Emperor Ludora, but rather an ultimate skill he had manifested on his own. Kondo had literally used his own power to awaken himself into an ultimate skill. This skill was Sandalphon, Lord of Judgment, and the command it held over battle made it supremely strong. It allowed him to fight on behalf of Emperor Ludora, a human being who desired to attain the throne of God himself. Sandalphon was what powered his Necrosis bullets, which could destroy the veins and outlets through which magic flowed in the target's body, allowing him to kill even spiritual life forms. Gazel was no weakling. In fact, he was one of the strongest people in the world. If the conditions were right, he could even defeat an awakened demon lord. But against Kondo, there was a strength barrier that not even he could ever overcome. It all came down to the presence, or lack thereof, of an ultimate skill. In that respect, the duel was decided even before it took place. Kondo said calmly, "Don't waste your time. I have no intention of killing you, Your Majesty. I will detain you for the time being, but when everything is settled, I promise you will be released." Kondo's voice was calm. He wasn't lying, but naturally he wasn't telling the complete truth either. Gazel would be released, but only after a Dominion bullet allowed Kondo to exercise his full domination over him. This was what he used to take control of Kigali, and it was also why he wanted to capture Gazel alive. It was an act as terrifyingly ruthless as it was perfectly rational, and that too said everything about the nature of Tatsuya Kondo. Hakuro too was no longer in any position to move. Witnessing Kondo's strength left him meekly standing there, looking frustrated. At this point, Kondo's victory seemed all but assured.
Route confirmed. The next episode and full playlist are ready.
Then don't stop here. Keep watching in story order and subscribe before the next part drops.